Jerry Springer, along with Gene Galvin and me. I'm Megan Hills. We're recorded live in front of a brilliant studio audience at the Folk School Coffee Parlor in Ludlow, Kentucky.
My daddy came home.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, the very professional Jerry Springer.
Thank you. Welcome.
The consummate professional.
Yeah. This is a big night.
Well, it's Tuesday.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but because with the announcement we're making tonight.
Well, yeah. Actually,
Are we making an
Jerry's just
announcement?
joking around. Last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, in terms of when you're hearing this in the archive, Jerry announced that he was not running for governor of the state of Ohio. Long story short, some people had asked him to do that. He processed it, and for various reasons, largely family considerations, he can't do it, at least in Ohio. But and Megan and I have been talking, as we do, because I produced the show, and Megan and I are on the phone like daily. We have conference calls and all that stuff.
It's a lot of production, pre-production for the show.
Pre-production conversations.
When you talk to her, it's not a conference call; it's a phone call.
Well, fair enough.
It's a valid point, Jerry.
It's the closest I'm ever going to come to what you guys call in your
actual
world, Jerry, a
conference call.
conference call,
Yes,
where there are a bunch of people.
Our
on call.
people.
Where
You
you're
have
talking
no
to. I have no
people.
people. I even asked Megan if she would be my people.
Absolutely
She said,
not.
"Hell no, no way, no." I have no
She
people.
wants to have a future.
But anyway, I was wondering, okay, Ohio, I live in Kentucky. Megan lives in Kentucky.
Yep.
We love the state of Kentucky.
Yep.
But let's face it, our legislature in Kentucky meets about 2 times a year for a weekend or something. I mean, there's not much that goes on. And it's a relatively small state population-wise. And I know that Ohio was too heavy of a lift for you politically, for you and your family and I assume your pocketbook, et cetera. You're sort of guarding resources as you're getting older. I get that. But
Guarding
here,
them
what
from
kind-
you.
from you,
That's where I'm guarding them for. Yeah.
would you consider a run for the governor of Kentucky?
Heck yeah, man.
And so I am announcing today my candidacy.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, why not?
You should. We'd love to have you.
I wouldn't have the family problems because Mickey's from Kentucky.
That's
Your
right.
wife is from
Cynthiana.
Cynthiana, Kentucky. I was
Yeah,
going to say Falmouth,
yeah.
but Cynthiana, Kentucky.
Yeah.
Have to
Yeah.
move to Ludlow.
And
Oh, well, then that's out.
well, now we have to
You didn't
remember
tell me that.
there are only mics here. There aren't mics out in the audience.
right,
But,
yeah.
But anyway, would you please consider running for governor of Kentucky?
Here's what I'm thinking. There are 50 states, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah.
Well, yeah. The answer is yes.
we've
There are
established
50 states. Yeah.
every week, let's raise the issue of another state. We can keep this thing going forever.
Oh, we could.
50
for
more
a year,
weeks.
and we take 2 weeks off of vacation.
Sure.
Okay.
Well,
Hey,
job security.
And I get this sense you're just joking around.
Yes.
When you say that.
Because
would
I'm
you?
protecting my,
You're guarding
interests.
your resources.
my resources. Yeah.
Would you consider, dead serious, and I have a way to do this, because I've worked a little in politics, you know that.
Come to think of it, I've already made headlines in Kentucky.
Well,
It's very true.
boom, boom, hey.
Oh, yes, he has.
Why do
This
people,
is
Megan,
wonderful. No, this is generational. Half the audience
Doesn't
laugh,
know.
and the other half
they have no idea.
This
I
is
don't
great.
understand.
This
See?
is wonderful.
You should move
I
to
have
Kentucky.
outlived it.
You've outlived.
I outlived it.
Podcast audience, look it up.
No. No.
Google it.
I'm going to give you a little help here.
Google it.
Jerry Springer, scandal. Anyway, Megan.
What's
Why
wrong
the
with
hell
my
do-
colon?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, man.
Why do you even know about this?
Don't even go there.
Yeah, don't even go there.
Don't please don't.
Why do you even know this, Megan? You're like, you weren't even born.
Oh, how did this come
Hey,
up?
Megan, you really weren't.
I really wasn't born yet. No.
Of course
All
not.
right.
No one was.
Anyway, hey, let's try to shift attention away from that. I got this idea. And I haven't talked to Catfish here, who owns a folk school coffee parlor in Ludlow, Kentucky, a place y'all have to visit if you're ever traveling around.
Yeah.
Ludlow, Kentucky is like unbelievable. And by the way, just to throw this,
cool.
another, Maria Corelli's a barista here and a singer-songwriter, and album's about to come out. And Maria, just the other day, I hang out here all the time. She brings over a young woman. She's my friend from high school. I've known her forever, grew up with her. Now, she is a singer-songwriter. She's moving into Ludlow. It just keeps happening. It's almost like every month there's somebody else moving in here, and we're reaching critical mass, and it's this little pocket of artsy people. It's the artist class. They're very cool. Anyway, I'm going to talk to Catfish. Catfish has a basement of this place. It's a very mysterious place down there, and I don't know what the
Catfish lives in the basement?
No, he lives upstairs.
He lives upstairs.
He lives upstairs with his wife. But what about this?
Yeah.
I'm going to school you on this. Get a U-Haul.
He doesn't know what that
Attach
is.
the U-Haul to your Bentley. Fill it up with some furniture, some like college kind of furniture.
Yeah.
Move it into the basement of Folk School Coffee Parlor. Set up residency. I think it might be for a few months you have to be a resident. And then run for city council of Ludlow, Kentucky.
Don't do that to Ludlow. This is a charming city.
I'll
Don't
be your
do
campaign
that.
manager.
You want me to bring my Bentley here?
Yeah, all right.
I never
just
got past that.
Swing
What
him,
was the rest
swing
of
him
the
by
stuff
the
he was
IKEA to
talking
pick
about?
up some stuff.
I can just
Yeah.
picture it.
Oh.
And by the way, we have Matt Woods from Knoxville, Tennessee, who's
Yep.
going to come on a little bit later on and do some music. He's really good.
Yeah, I heard him warming up. He's
And
really good.
Jerry's going to talk about, I don't know, looks to me like Trump had a bad week. We're going to ask Jerry to speak to that here in a few minutes. But one other thing, Jerry, I love sports. You love sports. You love sports.
Yep.
Megan, you're a big UK basketball fan.
CATS, baby.
I'm a big Xavier University basketball fan, ranked as of this week 13th in the country.
Yep.
And Jerry's a big Tulane basketball fan.
Excuse me, 227 in the country.
Tulane. Aw.
So I went to
A one, a two, a hell of a hullabaloo. Hullabaloo, ray, ray, hullabaloo, ray, ray, hooray, hooray. Farce, DA, Tulane. Everybody.
Did you get that on Facebook Live?
And you wonder why we are number
Oh,
227.
my God. I am embarrassed for you.
Hey,
right
Jimmy,
now.
you know how on Facebook Live that they'll shoot up a little happy face or something, thumbs up. You're not seeing any, are you? Nothing like that.
Turns out.
Nothing like that.
Oh,
Now little emojis like, oh, that was
it's
cool.
not the thumb, it's a finger.
Yeah.
Wow, Jerry.
So I went to
I didn't know you could do that. I really didn't.
I went to a fight the other day and a college basketball game broke out. So I went here in Cincinnati. I'm a proud Xavier University graduate. That's a university in Cincinnati. I have 2 degrees from there. I did some teaching there. And they have a great basketball program. It's been great for a bunch of years. University of Cincinnati, where my brother Jim has a degree from there. So my family's connected to the University of Cincinnati, UC as we call them. And they were last week ranked 11. So they're a good basketball program.
Yeah.
And they have this thing each year called the Crosstown Shootout.
Right.
One of the great college basketball rivalries in the country, along with Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, Louisville, stuff like that. So they had this game. I've never seen this in my life, and I've been watching college basketball for a lot of years. But during the game, this has happened, I'm sure, many times. There's a lot of jaw-jacking that goes on, people talking smack and cussing at each other and saying this and that, intimidation. And fans don't know it because it's in the middle of a loud arena, but there's just a lot of talking that goes on. So at one point, we have this player, J.P. Macura, who is a great player, by the way. Everybody wants him on their team, but everybody who plays against him hates him because he's just annoying. He's so good. He kind of annoys people. And allegedly, the University of Cincinnati coach claims that he told him to F off at some point during the game. And then at the end of the first half, 3 technicals were called. One on the University of Cincinnati coach, allegedly for talking some F stuff to him. And then JP talking some stuff back, and then a UC player got a T on him, so he had 3 technicals.
Are you talking about the game or my show?
No,
Right. No, that's kind of what it looked like.
Very similar. Very similar.
Kind of what it looked like.
Then when the game ends, this is the part that I've never seen before. When the game ends, they have that handshake line.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good game,
your
good game, good
grandson, Ricky, goes through those lines.
I'm sure
My
the kids
grandkids. Kids always do it.
Yeah.
No matter how hard the battle was, no matter how big the rivalry
You shake
is,
hands.
you walk down the line, coaches and players, and everybody's. And in that game, there were a lot of Xavier UC guys hugging because they know each other. They go to the same parties and all that. Came to J.P. Macura and the University of Cincinnati coach Mick Cronin, and he would not shake his hand. Cronin, the coach, would not shake the player from Xavier's hand. So maybe, so Cronin says in a post-game news conference that JP told him to go F himself again. Yeah. And Cronin turned around and was going to fight him. Oh, it's on YouTube, etc.
Yeah.
In fact, one of our tech people here knows the guy, Xavier graduate, who shot the stuff, the little clip that ended up on ESPN.
Oh, yeah?
And they had a referee and an assistant coach from UC pulling off Mick Cronin and taking him to the locker room.
It's leadership. That's what
Yeah, really. Leadership.
Is he still coaching?
Well, you know, it's funny.
Discipline?
I just on Facebook on my news feeds after seeing all that and being there, and I said, hey, this is what they ought to do. If Xavier can verify that J.P. Macura, our player, cussed at a coach during a game, I'd sit him down for a game. Mm-hmm. I would just say, I got your back, JP, and all that, because Coach Mack did. By the way, it gets better. I have to add one more thing. In the post-game news conference, Coach Chris Mack, Xavier's coach, when he hears that Coach Cronin, a buddy of his, they played against each other in high school, they're both Cincinnatians, and he heard he was trash-talking JP, he defended his player, JP Macura, and then he says, well, let me give you a contrast. In 2010, I was coaching the Xavier team. Mick Cronin was coaching this UC team. And Lance Stevenson, who now plays for the Indiana Pacers, he's playing professional basketball, making millions of dollars. He said during the game, he had never told this story, Stevenson called me the N-word 3 times and told me to F off. And when the game was over, we did win the game. When the game was over, I went down the handshake line and I shook his hand. Yeah. And I never said a word about it.
Because that's what you do.
As if to say, why is Cronin now doing this?
Right. Yeah. Right.
And I didn't do it back then. So then they went to Stevenson, naturally, the media did, and they interviewed him in Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Star. And he said, I'm kind of paraphrasing, he said, well, no, I didn't use that word. No, I never would have used that word. He says, but I'm sure I used some other words that were kind of as bad, and I was a punk, and I told him, I prided myself in getting under the skin of people, which is what Cronin claimed Macura did. And then 3 times later in the article, he says, I don't think I used that term. He said it 3 times, I don't think. I don't know whether he did or didn't, but his chance he did, and he's just a little rough to have to admit that.
Yeah, it's Trump all over again.
Really?
This is all Trump.
King of segues, let Jerry spread it.
No, but it's
sports.
Yeah, it's sports.
Sport ball.
Yeah. But that's an interesting. I don't know. My first reaction is if someone used the N word or something like that, I don't know that I would shake their hand.
Yeah.
I'd rather get
I hear
people
you.
booing me for being a bad sport. But at some point, you
I
kind of
hear
draw
you,
the
Jerry.
line that that's more important than
Whether or not you tell on him even.
Yeah.
You say, some things were done, I can't.
yeah.
It's a good point.
Because otherwise, the handshake doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
A handshake is a show of respect. Great competition. We won. You won. Good going. But you don't get my respect if you sink to that level.
I think that word is so repugnant.
Yeah.
So evil. that it's a special word,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
By the way, I would have sat Macura down for a game, and then I would have called
well,
on
that was
UC to pull their coach out for a game as well. And neither has happened. But
I think if
life
you
goes
use
on.
the N-word, or if you call someone a Republican, that's it.
That's it.
You know, there ought to be
doesn't get any
limits.
worse. Got to be limits in language.
Yeah.
Civilization that we live in. It's a
There's
civilized
certain
society.
things that you can't tolerate in a society.
Yeah.
I'm being stupid.
Well, speaking of all this craziness, it looks to us like Donald Trump at the time of the recording of this show, which, by the way, is December 5th when we're recording it and streaming it on Facebook Live, might have had a bad week.
You know, if you asked me what was Trump's worst week since he's been president, the answer is always the same. This past week. Because it keeps getting worse. It seems unbelievable. I mean, his week started off with, which is not unlike the issue we've just been talking about, even though it was at a basketball game, when he retweeted a fascist video. And I'm not using the term fascist as just to call someone a bad name. It was a fascist video. There's an organization in England called Britain First, which is a fascist organization. This is what they preach. And they made a video of some guy beating up a kid on crutches or person on crutches. And they said that the guy doing the beating up was a Muslim. And, they're saying this is what happens when you have Muslims in your country. And this is in Britain. Trump takes that video and retweets it. Many issues here. First of all, it was a totally fake video. The guy doing the beating up wasn't a Muslim. He was Dutch. It was several years ago. He was arrested, served time in prison, and is now out. But I don't even know if he knows any Muslims. So it was a totally fabricated video and lie. He retweeted it. And the people that follow him, 20, 30, 40 million people, got that video. Steaming up the people of Britain, of course, because they have to deal with this now, much less people that, get his tweets are all over the world, and certainly here in America as well. So other than that it was fake, why would an American president try to fan the flames of bigotry and hatred? And, people are going to get hurt now. There are crazy people out there that are going to start plugging away at Muslims, thinking that video is real. By God, we got to watch ourselves. I mean, imagine being a Muslim in either America or England and, wondering, everybody's staring at you. Is this some nut coming towards me? So it's the most irresponsible thing you can do, to literally try to start a riot. I would argue that may be a crime in itself. But anyway, so that's how the week started. And by the way, the response, the Prime Minister of Britain, Theresa May, she withdrew the invitation for Trump to come to Great Britain. What? England? Even England won't admit Trump into its country? We haven't fought with England for 205 years, since the War of 1812. England. They can't stand Trump. This isn't like a country we've been at war with. So that's where the week started. And by the way, the week ended, of course, with Michael Flynn, the National Security Advisor under Trump, pleading guilty. And it was such a light thing that he was charged with and pled guilty to as part of an agreement with the prosecutor, with Mueller, to now turn on, become state's evidence against Trump and the White House. So they're shaking in their boots, because you don't get that kind of a light sentence if there's not a deal made, and the deal made is that he's now going to talk. And there's nothing he doesn't know about what happened during the campaign and in the transition period in the White House as National Security Advisor regarding the Russians, regarding bank deals, everything. So it's a bad week for Trump. Now, I think it's pretty fair to say at this point, history will show that the presidency has never been so diminished. Nixon came close, and some of the behavior of Clinton was close in diminishing the presidency, to be honest. But this is as bad as it gets. Even the 30% of Americans that would still support Trump make excuses for doing it. You know, they don't say, I voted for Trump because he's just the best human being who ever lived. They say, well, yeah, we know what he's like. He shouldn't have had that, done those things to the women. He shouldn't have done this, that, and the other. And he should stop the tweeting and all that. But I like where he was on taxes, or I like the Supreme Court appointment or something like that. So there's always an excuse. It's pretty fair to say that the world, plus America, believes that this is really the lowest the American presidency has ever come. The point I'd like to make is, as bad as Trump is, it didn't happen overnight. That the diminishment of the presidency has been going on, and I will say, starting 54 years ago. 54 years ago would take us to November of 1963, the assassination of John Kennedy. Because things happened then that set into motion the role of the media in our society, and how, for the first time, we would get to see that the exalted position of President of the United States that kids had grown up with, you know, when your baby's born, what parent doesn't say, you know, one day you could grow up to be President of the United States? You know, that was like, wow. It was just, it almost became a cliche that that was the most honored thing that could happen to you in America. That's when it started to fall apart, because with the development of the modern media, we suddenly saw that our presidents weren't just in Mount Rushmore, rock figures, clay, they had feet of clay, that there were human beings there. Now, why do I say it started 54 years ago? On November 22nd of 1963, President Kennedy is assassinated. And I've mentioned this before, the only pictures we have of the assassination of John Kennedy that exist in the world are those taken by a tourist that happened to be in Dallas that Friday afternoon with a Brownie movie camera that he got for opening a bank account. And that was one of the prizes he got, or gifts he got. And he heard that Kennedy was coming by in a parade. This was a great moment, so he turned on his camera, and he was taking pictures, a moving picture of President Kennedy going by and then getting shot. So anything you've ever seen in newspapers, magazine, textbooks, TV programs about it, the assassination of Kennedy, Jackie climbing to the back of the car to help the Secret Service man come on, all of that, it comes from this fella's camera. No news organization had those pictures. None. That night, two things happened in America. The networks decided that never again would they ever miss a significant moment of history in America. So every network assigned full time, there is always some reporter covering the President of the United States, except when he's in the bathroom. I mean, they call it, in the business, they called it then, you know, the assassination watch. Did you ever wonder why when Reagan was shot, we have pictures of that? Think about it. Reagan was he was in Washington, D.C. He was just giving a talk at a luncheon at one of the hotels there. And he was simply, no major speech, and he was just walking out of the hotel into his car in Washington, D.C., the place he works. And we have 20 different angles of Reagan being shot. It's because every moment of every day, the President of the United States is being covered by the news. The networks have to justify this expenditure of constantly covering a president. And to do that, They justified by every night on the evening news, back when the networks really dominated, whatever the president did that day is some portion of the newscast, because you have to justify, why are we sending these reporters out? And so we started to see every blemish of every president. Think about it. Up until then in American history, every president was viewed as, wow, even if you didn't vote for him, didn't like him, my God, he's the president of the United States, and we support him in times of war or whatever it is. Now you had the first president after John Kennedy's assassination, Lyndon Johnson. The media was all over what was happening in Vietnam. In fact, 50 years ago this week, Gene McCarthy announced for president, and that was the beginning of the end, followed by Bobby Kennedy then, the beginning of the end of the Johnson presidency when he withdrew. Following Lyndon Johnson, you had Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon, followed by the media, you get Watergate. Following Richard Nixon, for 2 years you had Gerald Ford, but even he gets in trouble with giving the pardon. And then after Gerald Ford, you had Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter gets in trouble with the media because with the when Iran took our hostages and kept holding them. And going into the 1980 election, the most dominant news anchor in America was Walter Cronkite. And that was the news you watched. And Walter Cronkite, who was an icon himself, he would end every broadcast by saying, that's the way it is. Friday, December 3rd, 1900 and whatever it was. And then he'd say, 327 days since the Americans have been held hostage in Iran. And the next night he would say, 328 days since the Americans have been held hostage in Iran. Every single night for an entire year leading up to Election Day, Walter Cronkite would end the newscast by reminding Americans how ineffective Jimmy Carter was, that he couldn't bring the hostages that Iran was holding. And of course, that night, Reagan wins the election, and when Reagan gets sworn in on that very day, they let the hostages go. But that was the power of the media. And following Jimmy Carter, you have Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan lies to the American people about not selling arms for hostages. And then that was the Iran-Contra scandal, and he had to confess on national television because the news was all over this. With Clinton, it was Monica Lewinsky. With Bush the 43rd, it was the war in Iraq. The media is over everything. So Trump is obviously an abomination in terms of the image of what a president should be. But every single day, there are 10 or 15 stories about what horrible things he's doing or the people around him are doing. And it's because we will never again, unless something is done, be able to look at our presidents in the same way. Our presidents have become, with the possible exception, I would say, of Barack Obama, who, even if you didn't like his politics, was the definition of class. But other than Barack Obama, they all seem to have clay feet, and the media is all over their behavior. Added to that is not only that we find out all the things that this president has done, but we have a structural problem as well. In the last 16 years, twice the person who got the most votes did not become president. Gore got more votes than Bush, and Bush was declared president. Hillary got 3 million more votes than Trump, and Trump was declared president. Legally, but still it doesn't reflect the will of the American voter. And the problem with that is the presidency starts out with a credibility problem. Yeah, we know Trump's president, but people aren't walking around the street really believing that he's our leader and we ought to listen to what he says because he's got great wisdom. How many discussions have there been? We hope there's smart people around Trump. We hope there are other people that will control the finger on the button, all this kind of stuff. So we may have to deal with that issue of how we elect presidents anymore, because the demographics of America are such that in the coming years, I am afraid we are going to continue to have a president who didn't get the most votes. Since most Americans live on the coasts, one way or the other, and the middle states, Montana, Idaho, Kansas, North Dakota, South Dakota, that's where the electoral votes are, in places where most people don't live. And so we will continue, I think, in the near future, to have a president elected who does not get the most votes. That is also going to hurt the credibility of our president. Finally, the thing we have to do, if we are ever to restore the presidency to a place where it ought to be as a leader of this great country of ours, first thing that has to happen, even though structurally changing it is going to be very difficult, we at least have to make sure that these politicians pay a price for their misdeeds. And the price is up to we, the American people, to make them pay. You can make them pay through your elected representatives, whether it's an indictment, whether it's impeachment, whether it's a 2018 election and then a 2020 election. If we as the American people, seeing everything, for example, that Trump is doing, and we don't exact a price, in this case from the Republican Party. I mean, even with Clinton, there was some price to pay. He was impeached. The Senate didn't go for it, but he was impeached. If Trump gets away scot-free with this, we have basically said, you can say anything, you can stir up racism, you can screw up or get us to the edge of nuclear war, you can make any bank deals you want, you can do anything you want, and you won't pay a political price. That would be horrible for America. It's a blank check to do whatever you want. The only people that can stop that are we, the American people.
All right, coming on up to the microphone now, we have Matt Woods. Hi, Matt. Almost up here.
Yeah, you lied.
I did. I lied. I'm sorry. How's it going? You're joining us this evening. You were from Knoxville originally. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You came up from
just down the
Nashville.
way, right?
Yeah. Very cool. So you were touring in through Nashville and came up to Cincinnati. Where are you heading to next?
This is actually the end of it. I've been living in Nashville now for the past year.
Oh, got it.
So I've been traveling with my friend Adam Lee. who
Yeah,
lives
yeah.
right here in Ludlow.
Yep, we know Adam.
Yeah, so.
Very cool. Very, very cool. First song that you have for us is The American Way.
Right.
All right, so let's hear it and we'll talk about it.
Some men war the desert heat. Daddy fought hard so his kids could eat. Working metal in a mill on Industrial Street. We're still waiting on his Purple Heart. He took shrapnel in the shoulder when that forklift failed. The hydraulics went out and he lost that bale. Said he could still taste the way that furnace smelled. But he was bleeding on the factory floor. The American way. Bottle rockets in the air on Independence Day. Working harder for $1 so we all can pay. Die the American way. The Union went on strike back in '89. With his good left arm held a cardboard sign. 12 hours a day on that picket line, asking cars to honk their horns. The American way, bottle rockets in the air on Independence Day, working harder for a dollar so we all can pay to die the American way. Who's to hate when we're all the same? God don't bet on football games. They'll all kneel down, start to pray. A couple months back they sent brother home. PTSD and a VA loan. The old man and he can never get along. It weren't for that bottle of pills, the American way, bottle rockets in the air on Independence Day, working harder for a dollar so we all can pay to die the American way, bottle rockets in the air on Independence Day, working harder for a dollar so we all can pay to die the American way, working harder for a dollar so we all can pay to die the American way.
Very cool. So Matt, how long have you been playing? How long have you been singing, doing your thing, solo group?
Man. More than 2 decades.
More than 2 decades.
Wow.
Has
In
this
some
always
shape or
been your
form.
sound, or what brought you to this type
No,
of sound?
I kind of I grew up playing in rock and roll bands.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it all sort of starts for a lot of us. But growing up in East Tennessee, you know, I listened to a lot of country music as a kid. My dad would play all the classic country songwriter records, and
Sure.
you know, and I found as I got older, I sort of drift back toward that kind of like country sound.
Yeah.
And just try to keep, you know, try to have a part of growing up here in it and have a part of me in it.
Sure.
Was any part of the song you just sang personal? Was it related to someone you knew?
Pieces of it are certainly personal, yeah.
Wow.
Like, I would say there are a couple of parts of that ringing true to my own kind of, my own life. And then I hope the story overall is a little broader and can reach many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very, very applicable to what we were speaking about earlier. So
Yeah.
right on topic, man. So next we have Wake Me on Christmas.
Yeah, right?
Yeah?
It's good to be here during the holiday
Heck
season.
yeah, man.
Someone asked me a couple of years back if I would be interested in writing a Christmas song, which was a concept I hadn't given much thought before. You know, for a compilation record to raise money, you know,
Sure.
and for a local charity, you know, helping the homeless in East Tennessee. I had one question for him. I asked him if it had to be happy. And he said, no. Yeah.
This isn't chestnuts roasting.
right.
No, that's not what we're
You
getting
don't-
ready for.
You don't strike me as jovial. as much as you want to look like Santa.
So I did. I wrote this one here. This is called Wake Me on Christmas.
Excellent.
It's a wonderful life in black and white, where angels get wings, sing silent night outside these window panes. Well, there's a cold winter's rain. Wish you'd give me a ring. All I hear are them chains. Won't you wake me on Christmas? your memory. I need some assembly. I fell apart since you've gone. Wake me on Christmas if you decide to come home. Talk with the king about that blue Christmas thing. He didn't have no advice, but the man sure can sing. Won't you wake me on Christmas? I'll be under the tree, wrapped up in whiskey, your memory. I need some assembly. I fell apart since you've gone. Wake me on Christmas if you decide to come home. Won't you wake me on Christmas? I'll be under the tree, wrapped up in whiskey, our old memories. Lord, I need some assembly. I fell apart since you've gone. Wake me on Christmas if you decide to come home. Wake me on Christmas if you decide to come home.
Whoa! Whoa!
Yeah.
Great job.
All kinds of happy and cheerful up in here. No, man, that was awesome. That was really excellent. If you don't mind, Mr. Springer here is going to jump in with you on Down by the Riverside.
If that wasn't depressing enough for you, try this.
We're going to listen to Jerry sing.
All right.
Cool. Thanks again. And we can check out your music where?
At therealmattwoods.com.
Therealmattwoods.com.
Links from there to every other site on the internet.
Excellent.
Super.
Well, loved having you. Love your voice.
Thanks,
Lots of
bud.
fun.
Great.
Very cool. All right, take it away. Sorry about Jerry.
Gonna lay down my heavy load down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. And I'm gonna lay down that heavy load down by the riverside. Gonna study or no more.
I ain't gonna study or no more. Ain't gonna study or no more. I ain't gonna study or no more. I ain't gonna study or no more. Ain't gonna study or no more. I ain't gonna study or no more. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Down by the riverside, down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield. Down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. All right, whoa! Y'all come back now, you hear? Woo! Great. Great. Oh, man, that was good.